You know how every day the world needs more and more food?
Yeah,
It's a pretty big challenge, right?
really,
It makes you wonder what innovative solutions are out there to help.
for sure.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into a field that's already doing some amazing things.
Uh-huh.
Agricultural
It's
biotechnology.
exciting stuff.
Absolutely. We're looking at a really fascinating market research report.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it gives this really detailed picture of the global agricultural biotechnology market.
So, like, where it is now
Exactly.
and where it's headed.
You got it. And to be honest, the numbers are pretty astounding.
Wow.
This report says that in 2025, the global market will be worth a massive 275.84 billion US dollars.
That's huge.
But it gets even more interesting. They're projecting that by 2033, this market will balloon to 565.97 US dollars.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
growing at a rate of 9.440% every single year.
That's a really fast pace.
It really is. That kind of growth shows just how important agricultural biotechnology is going to be.
Yeah, for feeding everyone on the planet
Yeah,
and improving how we farm.
absolutely. So what we want to do today is break down those numbers,
Okay.
understand the big trends that are driving this expansion,
Uh-huh.
explore how different parts of the world are using these technologies,
Right.
and pinpoint the innovations that are pushing this whole thing forward.
I like it.
So think of this as your shortcut to understanding this crucial area.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's start with the big picture. We're talking about a global market that's already worth more than $250 billion.
Wow.
And it's projected to basically double in less than a decade.
That's amazing.
As the report says, this huge growth is tied to the fact that the world needs more food.
Makes sense. More people, more mouths to feed.
Exactly. It's a pretty simple equation.
Uh-huh.
And agricultural biotech is offering some really promising solutions.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember, though, that this global market is not the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Different parts of the world are adopting these technologies at different speeds.
You're right.
There are unique factors at play in each region.
Okay, so let's break it down by region, starting with North America.
Okay.
This report says that North America currently has the biggest share of the market, over 40%.
Wow.
And in 2025, it'll be worth an estimated 102.06 billion US dollars.
That's a lot.
It is. And they're predicting a solid annual growth rate of 7.8% between 2025 and 2033.
So what's driving that dominance in North America?
Well, there are a few key things happening there.
Like what?
First, there's been a lot of progress in genetic engineering.
Right, where scientists modify the genes of plants to make them better.
Yeah, give them beneficial traits.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a big push from farmers for crops that produce more and can resist pests.
That's essential for efficient farming.
Totally. And importantly, the U.S. in particular has regulations that are pretty supportive of agricultural biotechnology.
So it's easier for these technologies to develop there.
Exactly. And just like everywhere else, there's a lot of concern about having a secure food supply and dealing with climate change.
Those are global issues.
They are. And those concerns are big motivators for using agricultural biotech.
Makes sense. It's fascinating how even within North America there are variations.
Right.
The U.S. market is projected to be 80.53 billion US dollars in 2025, with a growth rate of 7.6%.
Which is already huge.
It is. And then you have Canada at 12.25 billion US dollars with a slightly higher growth rate of 8.6%.
And then there's Mexico at 9.29 billion US dollars and an 8.3% growth rate.
I wonder if those differences in growth rates tell us something about the priorities of each country.
You're right. Or maybe it reflects the specific challenges they face in agriculture.
Yeah, like maybe Canada's slightly faster growth is because they're investing more in precision agriculture.
Oh yeah, using technology to farm more effectively.
Exactly. And Mexico's growth probably reflects its own unique needs.
Right. And the technologies they're choosing are probably tailored to their specific environment and their economy.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about Europe? What's going on over there?
Well, they hold over 30% of the global market.
Wow.
They're estimated to be at 79.99 billion US dollars in 2025 with a projected annual growth of 8.4%.
So another big player.
Oh yeah.
What's shaping the market there?
So in Europe, there's a really strong focus on sustainability.
Right.
You know, farming in a way that's good for the environment.
Uh-huh.
And that seems to be driven by what consumers want.
Yeah. people in Europe are really conscious of where their food comes from and how it's produced.
You're right, and we see that clearly in Germany.
Okay.
Their market is estimated to be 15.84 billion US dollars in 2025,
Okay.
with a strong growth rate of 8.6% every year.
Right.
And the report specifically mentions a growing demand for environmentally friendly agricultural solutions in Germany.
Gotcha.
Then you have the UK, which is estimated to be at 13.44 billion US dollars with an annual growth rate of 7.3%.
So a little bit slower than Germany.
It is, and the UK seems to be really into precision farming techniques.
That's interesting.
It is. And we also have to consider the impact of the European Union regulations.
Oh, right.
They tend to favor biotech approaches that are good for the environment.
So it seems like Europe is really putting a lot of emphasis on sustainability.
Yeah. So even though North America is bigger in terms of the overall market size right now, Europe is establishing itself as a leader in sustainable agriculture.
That's a great point.
It really aligns with what we hear coming out of Europe in general, right?
Definitely. The rules and what consumers want play a big role in how quickly new farming technologies are adopted.
All right, so let's shift our focus to the Asia-Pacific region, which is often called APAC.
Okay.
They make up about 23% of the global market,
Okay.
estimated at 66.20 billion US dollars in 2025,
Right.
but with a much faster growth rate of 12.2%.
Wow.
That suggests that this region has a ton of potential.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it develops.
So what's causing that rapid growth?
Well, there are a few powerful things happening in APAC. First of all, there's huge pressure from the demand for food.
Right. They have a really big population.
Yeah, and it's still growing.
And in many parts of Asia, they have less and less land available for farming,
Exactly. Shrinking arable land.
which means they really need more efficient methods. And on top of that, many governments in APAC are actively promoting the use of agricultural biotechnology.
They see it as a solution to their challenges.
They do. And we see this in the numbers for China and India.
Okay.
China has a market size of 27.80 billion US dollars with an annual growth rate of 11.7%.
Wow.
And India is at 6.62 billion US dollars with an even higher growth rate of 14.1%.
That's impressive.
It is. The report identifies both of those countries as key areas of expansion.
It sounds like the combination of a growing population and limited land is really pushing them towards agricultural biotech.
It is, and the support from their governments is a big factor too.
Yeah, when the government is behind something, it can make a big difference.
Now, let's move on to some smaller but still important regions. South America has over 5% of the global market,
Right.
estimated at 10.48 billion US dollars in 2025,
Okay.
and with a good annual growth rate of 10.1%.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. And they specifically mention Brazil and Argentina.
Yeah, they're big agricultural players.
So what are they doing in the global landscape?
Well, South America already has really strong agricultural sectors,
Mm-hmm.
especially Brazil and Argentina.
Right.
Brazil is expected to have a market size of 4.49 billion US dollars and a growth rate of 10.7%.
Wow.
And Argentina is at 1.76 billion US dollars with an 11% growth rate.
Okay.
It seems like they're naturally drawn to technologies that can help them produce even more.
Yeah, they already produce a lot.
Yeah, especially for export.
Right. And now on to the Middle East.
Okay.
They have around 2% of the market share.
All right.
It's estimated at 11.03 billion US dollars in 2025,
Okay.
and they have an annual growth rate of 10.7%. The report highlighted Saudi Arabia specifically.
What's driving demand in that region?
Well, the Middle East has some unique challenges for agriculture.
Right. They have a lot of desert.
Yeah, and water scarcity is a big issue.
Uh-huh.
But agricultural biotechnology offers some solutions
Like how?
by developing crops that don't need as much water.
Oh, that's smart.
And they're working on more efficient irrigation techniques, too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Saudi Arabia is a key player in this, according to the report.
Okay.
They have a market of 3.88 billion US dollars and a growth rate of 11%.
So it seems like they're investing in those water-saving solutions.
They are. Lastly, we have Africa.
Right.
They have about 1% of the global market share,
Right.
estimated at 6.07 billion US dollars in 2025,
Right.
with an annual growth rate of 9.7%.
Right.
And they mention South Africa and Nigeria specifically.
Gotcha.
So what's happening in Africa in terms of agricultural biotech?
Well, Africa faces some of the toughest challenges when it comes to food security.
Yeah, they really need to increase their agricultural productivity.
Exactly. And agricultural biotechnology is seen as a key solution there.
Especially developing crops that produce more food and can handle tough conditions.
Yeah, they need crops that are resilient.
South Africa has a market of 2.14 billion US dollars and a growth rate of 10.6%.
Okay.
And Nigeria is at 0.49 billion US dollars with a 9.9% growth rate.
So those are two important markets in Africa.
They are, and adopting biotech solutions is crucial for them.
Yeah, to improve their farming and feed their growing populations.
It's really interesting to see how different regions are approaching agricultural biotechnology.
It is. They all have their own unique sets of challenges and priorities.
Right.
And they're all embracing these technologies in different ways.
Some are moving faster than others, but they all see the potential.
Absolutely. It's a global trend. Now that we have a good grasp of the regional side of things, let's look at the technologies themselves.
Okay.
The ones that are driving this growth.
Let's start with genetic engineering. The report says that this is likely to be the dominant force in the market.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
With genetic engineering, you can modify crops to achieve all sorts of things.
Exactly, like getting higher yields, making crops resistant to pests,
Right.
helping them tolerate drought.
It's really powerful stuff.
Yeah, and they're using advanced techniques like CRISPR to do this.
Yeah, and more traditional methods of introducing genes.
So why is genetic engineering expected to be so dominant?
I think it's because it directly addresses some of the biggest problems in agriculture.
Like what?
Like producing enough food to meet the growing demand.
Right.
And creating crops that can survive the changing climate.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And another benefit is that we can reduce the need for chemical pesticides.
Oh, yeah?
By making crops naturally resistant to pests.
That's good for the environment.
It is. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, in terms of growth, we have molecular diagnostics.
Okay.
The report highlights this as the fastest growing segment.
That's pretty interesting.
It is. Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm guessing it's because it plays a crucial supporting role.
Yeah. It helps us understand and manage crops better.
So how does it work?
Well, molecular diagnostics can accurately detect diseases in plants.
Early on?
Yeah.
That's good.
And it can identify specific genetic traits.
Okay.
And even analyze the microorganisms in the soil.
The soil microbiome.
Yeah, and all this information helps farmers and plant breeders make better decisions.
So like intervening early if there's a disease.
Exactly.
Or selecting the best plants for breeding. It's like giving them a roadmap to healthier and more productive crops.
It is. It's all about precision.
So while genetic engineering is about changing the crops themselves, molecular diagnostics is about giving us the knowledge to manage them better.
Exactly. It's a really important synergy.
Now, let's move on to how these technologies are actually used in the market.
Okay.
The report talks about different type segments, and it says that transgenic crops have the biggest market share.
Which makes sense, given what we've talked about with genetic engineering.
Right.
So these are crops that have been genetically modified
Yeah.
to have certain characteristics.
Right.
Increased yield,
Uh-huh.
resistance to pests.
And herbicides. We're talking about things like black cotton and herbicide-tolerant soybeans.
Exactly. These crops are used worldwide.
Because they work.
They do. They increase productivity, reduce the need for pesticides, and in many cases, lower costs for farmers.
That all contributes to food security.
It does.
And it's good for the farmers, bottom line.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a win-win. The report also mentions biofertilizers as a rapidly expanding segment,
Okay.
which connects back to our discussion about sustainability.
Right.
So biofertilizers are made from living microorganisms,
Uh-huh.
and they're becoming more popular because they're a more sustainable way to improve soil.
Right. It's a more natural way to help plants get nutrients.
Exactly. And it helps reduce the use of synthetic fertilizers, which can be bad for the environment.
Right. So farmers can be productive and environmentally responsible at the same time?
That's the goal. And there are also biopesticides, which are gaining traction too.
Okay.
These are pesticides that come from natural sources, like bacteria or fungi.
So another environmentally friendly option.
Exactly. People are becoming more and more concerned about the impact of chemicals on the environment.
And on their health.
Right. So these bio-based solutions are becoming increasingly important.
Now let's talk about organism-type segments. The report says that plants have the largest market share.
That makes sense. After all, agriculture is primarily focused on plants.
Right. They're the ones we eat.
Exactly. So a lot of the efforts in genetic modification and breeding are aimed at improving plants.
To make them more productive and to help them survive in different conditions.
Right. whether it's increasing their yield, making them resistant to diseases, or helping them tolerate drought. Plants are the main target.
But the report also mentions that microbes are a rapidly growing segment.
Which makes sense, considering what we've been talking about with biofertilizers and biopesticides.
Right.
Microbes are becoming increasingly important.
Yeah. We're realizing that the tiny organisms around plants play a big role in their health.
We do. They can help them absorb nutrients more effectively,
Huh.
and they can protect them from diseases.
So we're not just focused on changing the plants themselves, we're also looking at how to use the power of microbes to our advantage.
Precise. It's a more holistic approach to agriculture.
So let's move on to the application segments. The report says that, not surprisingly, transgenic crops still have the biggest share here.
Yeah, they're the most widely used application of agricultural biotechnology.
And that segment really shows how this research is being put into practice.
Right. We're taking these modified crops and getting them to the farmers who need them.
And ultimately, they end up in our food.
Exactly. It's all about improving our food system.
Now, the report also mentions that synthetic biology-enabled products are growing rapidly as an application.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So can you explain what synthetic biology is and how it's used in agriculture?
Sure. Synthetic biology is all about designing and engineering biological systems.
So like creating artificial life.
It's not quite like that, although it can sound that way.
Yeah.
It's more about taking what we know about biology and using it to create new solutions.
So how does that apply to agriculture?
Well, for example, we can use synthetic biology to create microbes that are really good at producing fertilizers.
Okay.
Or we can develop crops that have built-in resistance to pests.
So it's like we're engineering specific solutions to specific problems.
Exactly. And it's a much more precise and customizable approach compared to some older genetic engineering techniques.
Right. In the past, we might have taken a gene from one organism and put it into another. But with synthetic biology, we're creating new biological functions from scratch.
That's a good way to put it. It's like we're building with biological Lego blocks.
It sounds very advanced.
It is. And it offers a lot of potential for improving agriculture and making it more sustainable.
Right. And it seems like the demand for those kinds of solutions is growing.
It is. The increasing investment in precision agriculture and the push for eco-friendly practices are really accelerating things.
Now let's talk about what's driving this market forward, the market drivers.
Okay.
The report mentions advancements in gene editing technologies like CRISPR.
Oh, yeah. CRISPR is a game changer.
What makes it so special for agricultural biotech?
Well, CRISPR allows us to edit genes with incredible precision.
Like super precise.
Yeah. It's like having a pair of molecular scissors that can cut and paste DNA exactly where we want.
Wow.
So we can create crops with very specific traits.
Like what?
Like the ability to withstand drought, for example.
Okay.
Or we can improve their nutritional content.
That's amazing.
And we can do it all much faster and more accurately than before.
So CRISPR is really speeding up innovation in agriculture.
It is. It's opening up a whole new world of possibilities.
The report also mentions climate change as a major driver.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Farmers need crops that can handle drought and other extreme weather events.
Right. The climate is changing, and we need to adapt.
And agricultural biotechnology can help us create those climate-resilient crops.
It can. And the demand for those crops is only going to increase as climate change intensifies.
It's a really pressing issue.
It is. And the last market driver the report mentions is government support.
Okay.
And the growing number of regulatory approvals.
So the political and regulatory environment plays a big role.
It does. Governments can invest in research and development, and they can create rules that make it easier to develop and sell these new crops.
Right.
And that's especially important in countries where agriculture is a major part of the economy.
Of course, there are always challenges, too.
Right.
The report outlines some market restraints.
Okay.
One of the biggest is that it can be hard for smaller farmers to adopt these technologies.
Yeah. They can be expensive.
And they often require specialized knowledge and equipment.
It's a valid concern. We need to make sure that the benefits of agricultural biotechnology are accessible to everyone.
Right. Not just the big agricultural corporations.
Exactly. We need to make sure that smaller farmers, who are often the backbone of food production in many parts of the world, aren't left behind.
So what can be done about that?
Well, we need to develop more affordable technologies and provide training and support to help smaller farmers use them effectively.
So looking towards the future, the report also talks about market trends.
Okay.
As we've discussed, the adoption of genetically modified crops is a big one
It's an ongoing trend that's likely to continue.
because they offer so many benefits.
They do. Increased yield, pest resistance, adaptability to climate change. It's all there.
And the report also mentions increasing investments in CRISPR and other gene editing technologies.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it seems like the focus on these advanced technologies is going to intensify.
It makes sense. CRISPR and other gene editing tools are so precise and powerful that they have the potential to revolutionize agriculture.
And to make it more sustainable.
Exactly.
Now, for a quick look at the competitive landscape, the report mentions that BASF is investing heavily in a new plant for biological crop protection.
Oh, yeah.
It's expected to start operating in late 2025.
That's a big commitment.
It is, and it really shows how the industry is shifting towards more sustainable solutions.
Definitely. When a company like BASF invests that much in biological crop protection, it sends a strong signal.
And the report also mentions a study in the Philippines that's looking at public perception of agricultural biotechnology.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it highlights how important it is for people to understand and accept these technologies.
Right. Public perception can make or break these innovations.
So it's important to have open and honest conversations about the science and the potential benefits and risks.
Absolutely. Building trust is essential.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's clear that the agricultural biotechnology market is booming.
It's not just growing, it's changing how we produce food.
It's a really dynamic and complex landscape
Definitely.
with a lot of variation across different regions. And it's being driven by both the need for more food and these amazing technological advances.
Right. It's all about feeding the world in a sustainable way.
Exactly. And for you, our listener, we hope this has given you a good understanding of what's happening in this incredibly important market.
It's a field with so much potential.
And it's going to have a huge impact on how we eat in the future.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay.
Considering all the advancements we've talked about and the different approaches around the world, what do you think are the most crucial things to consider when it comes to the future of agricultural biotechnology?
Good question.
And what role do you think you, as a consumer, can play in shaping how this market evolves?
That's definitely something to think about.